Hi and welcome to Mailbox 37, where I go through some of the more interesting comments and questions that have appeared on YouTube or Twitter or wherever on my account. And the first one, someone saying on the Rep Paladin one I did yesterday, seen the two Datamined abilities that generate holy power. I wonder if they're for an NPC or for us. This isn't Ret specific, really. There, you may find an awful lot of things Datamined that they're not really what they seem. So this relates to some spells that people have found. They're uncategorized, which means they're not assigned. And people thinking, oh, you know, is this coming for Battle for Azeroth? They just haven't assigned them yet. Because some of them look out quite nice. And you may find them for different classes and specs as well. Now, when I looked through them for the Paladin ones, one of them was fairly obviously so. But all of them were basically spells for Legion. They just never made it to the final cut. But it is interesting, if you think about it, these spells that you may find being data mined that are not categorized, in other words, they've gone as far as put them in the game file. So that means it's gone through discussions and people have thought, yeah, that's quite a good idea, let's try that out. They've put it in the game files, they haven't actually implemented it, but they went to the trouble of doing them. Now, when you're asking for a wish list, let's say you're posting on the forums, which of course you should, the official forums that is, or tweeting Warcraft devs about what you want for your class or spec, then there are some things you sort of know they're just not going to back down on. There are some things where if there was enough people, they would think about it. But when it comes to something like that, if any of them sound good, absolutely be posting on the forums. Because you've got to bear in mind, the fact that it's gone as far as actually making those spells and putting them in the files means that there were some supporters of it at Blizzard. So if any of them sound quite good, say, oh yeah, this would be fantastic, why don't we have some of this? Because you never know, there's probably a few people at Blizzard going, well, I think that would have been really good. And now you're giving them ammunition to say, look, you know, they liked this idea that I had, why don't we try it out for Battle for Azeroth? Next one, hashtag Spood Beast. Okay, so apparently, a little bit of a spoonerism. So again, this is from the Rep video I did yesterday. So let's have a listen to this. There's loads of people posting about this, and I thought, what are they on about? But, you know, exactly like it. So you put it on someone, it removes the movement and pair effects, but also gives you a Spood Beast. So, okay. Yes, as I say, pardon my spoonerisms there. Although it does sound like quite a good name for a creature, doesn't it? A Spood Beast. I wonder what a Spood Beast would look like. It sort of put me in mind of a shovel tusk, something like that, you know, from Wrath of the Lich King. Maybe there's any good artists among you could draw what a Spood Beast would actually look like. That would be quite interesting. So, on to the next one. Now, the first of several comments about gnomes, right? Now, I thought I'd managed to educate enough people. So, the question here says, regarding gnomes, there is actually a legitimate reason for them to exist. The Gnomebane title that you get from Nemesis Gnomebane. No, not at all. Because the only reason you even need such a title is because they exist in the first place. If they didn't exist, they wouldn't be needed. It's a bit like saying criminals are good because it gives jobs to the police and the courts. No, it would still be better if people didn't break the law. It's the same thing here. It would still be better if they didn't exist. If they didn't exist, we wouldn't want the title Gnomebane because they wouldn't exist to create that desire in the first place. Next one, some more serious ones. So during BlizzCon, Chris Robinson said Orc will be able to stand straight at some point in BFA. It's supposed to be an option at the barber's shop. Things can change, of course. They did indeed say that. I don't remember who said it, but you know, Chris Robinson, that sounds fine to me. We don't necessarily how high up it is on the priority list. You've got to remember there's an awful lot of cosmetic things they've talked about. So Worgen and Goblins is one that keeps being asked about, you know, when they're going to get updated models. Obviously, when they started updating the models for the original races, you know, Worgen and Goblin were much lower down the priority list at the time because they'd come in Cataclysm much later on, so they had better models than those other races. Now that other races have had updated models, okay, Worgen and Goblin will climb higher on the list. But you can imagine there is going to be this list of priorities. It's a bit like me when or anyone, I suppose, when they've got a list of things to do, where there's more things to do than they can possibly get done in a reasonable amount of time. So it's a list that's constantly being added to, and it's not necessarily jobs get put to the bottom of the list. They get moved up and down according to priority. Saying that it's going to happen at some time during BFA does sort of suggest that it's reasonably high on the list. Otherwise, they'd be saying just at some point they'll be doing it. It does sound a bit weird as a barbershop one. I know they were, when they was talking about BlizzCon, they were joking, weren't they, about maybe it's a barber come chiropractor to actually get them to stand up straight. But yeah, I don't know exactly when it would come in. It didn't sound to me when they were talking about it like it would be there for launch or even soon after launch. It could well be one of those things that gets done much later into the expansion, but we'll just have to wait and see on that one. So the next one, I was talking about, you know, inscription as a source of revenue, because I've found, and I've been on 3 different realms with mains in Legion, and I've never been able to find on any of them that, I mean, I suppose technically the first one, the one I started off on Legion, I didn't get my scribe leveled up, so that's probably a bit of a silly reason to talk about. But certainly the last 2 realms I've been on, the one I'm on now and the previous one, I've never really found that it's worthwhile making things with inscription, because the what you can sell these things for is, or as you know, has been for some time, less than the cost of materials. In other words, you've got the raw materials, you might as well just sell the raw materials. So I was interested to see if other people were. Some people actually said that they were able to sell at a profit, which was interesting. But this person said, I find it relatively easy to make gold in Legion, but not for my professions. Says, I'm an alchemist and herbalist, but I've not even found it useful to upgrade all the alchemy recipe to 3 stars. The best way to level up your alchemy to do it for the 3 stars one is at the start of the expansion. At the start of the expansion, professions are phenomenally useful if you spend time on them. For example, in the guild I was in at the time, the alchemists were based, because I was in a raid guild, everyone needs flasks and potions. So you were paying the extortionate price for the herbs on the auction house if you weren't a herbalist. So I'm enchanter blacksmith, so I had nothing. Although I have other outs that do have those professions, it was some time before I got around to leveling them up. So I would have to get the herbs, and then I would give. Obviously, I don't want to pay for the flasks because they were ridiculously expensive. So there's bound to be alchemists in the guild. You give them the materials, and they will give you back what they get. And that way, the alchemists in the guild got to skill up their flasks and potions with other people's materials, so it's free for them. They weren't having to go out and get a load of materials just to get those 3 stars. It would inevitably happen, although with some of them it took hundreds of casts to do it, sometimes 1,000 nearly. But that's the way to do it. You want to get in on the ground floor. And with professions, they can be profitable if you do it from the ground floor, any of them. Because there's always things every profession does that people will want. But it's a question of, can you spend enough time on those professions to be able to do that? But alchemy, if you're in a raiding guild, even as a social member, is the best one, because people want their flasks and potions making, and you'll just say, oh, get that. And the first person to get rank 3, because as soon as anyone gets rank 3, all of a sudden that's the only person that's going to be making them then. You know, the first one to get rank 3, you know, that's it. You can not only be making your own and selling them on the auction house, but again, you know, everyone's going to come to you to get them made. At which point, of course, it becomes annoying, because once you've got rank 3, you no longer need other people to give you their stuff, but they're going to. They are going to. It says, all of my herb skills are maxed, but mostly because I'm stubborn. However, I found it easy to make a lot of gold simply doing world quests, heroics, and raids. Absolutely. Of course, I'm a healer, so I often get bonuses, which are 800 plus gold per drop. To me, this is an issue that I can make money playing the game rather than doing professions. The whole point of professions should be to earn gold. Ooh, I don't know. I'm not sure I agree with that one. See, for me, the whole point of professions is to be able to make things for yourself. The fact that you can make them for others is a bonus, but for me, it's been able to make things. I find the interest just in doing that, which is why, I mean, I started when I have quite a lot of alts. The reason I started making alts in the first place was for professions, so that I could cover all of the professions I needed. And like in vanilla, I only had 1 alt, and then that was just for the sake of having one. But in TBC is the first time where I had like half a dozen, and every one of them had different professions, and it was there so that I could be self-reliant, so that I could make what I needed myself. But I've never in any expansion tried to make gold out of it, even though I probably could. You know, at the end of every expansion, I'm trying to be a bit better this expansion, but at the end of every expansion, what I inevitably end up doing is just basically destroying loads of craft materials, because I never sold them or made stuff and sold stuff with them like that. Like, enchanting ones are the worst, because you can't even vend those. They just they instantly become worthless overnight. So I'm being better this expansion. I am actually selling my hundreds of chaos crystals when I get hundreds, and using them, and sometimes making the odd enchant and selling that as well. But yeah, so for me the appeal is actually being self-reliant, being able to make my own stuff. It says the whole... I just don't see that it has been successful in Legion. No, I don't think it's met that requirement in Legion, really, in terms of the making money off it. But I could be wrong. Like, as I say, I viewed Inscription as being fundamentally unprofitable just because of my experiences with it. But, of course, different servers, different economies, all the rest of it. Next one. Wait, what the hell is a shaman? There is no such class in the game. Do I really have to reach for my big book of words, otherwise known as the dictionary again? So we go to the Oxford English Dictionary, and in amongst the different pronunciations we have this. Shaman. That's how it's pronounced. It's really weird. I keep aiming to have this, and although I don't know the nationality of the people who come up with comments like this, I do have to wonder, is this the United States again? Is this the pronunciation of words has so little variation in the US that people imagine that people in other countries don't pronounce words differently? Because it baffles the hell out of me. Absolutely baffles the hell out of me. Keep getting these comments. So if someone could explain that, that'd be marvellous. Because I don't understand it. Anyway, next one. Well, this is a related one, actually. Again, another grammar Nazi. So that was a pronunciation one. I make money off correcting people in trade who don't know the word scribe. You make money out of that? Really? Because where I come from, people who do that are, shall we say, disincentivized from doing so again. How do you make money doing that? Anyway, so back onto more serious ones. So the story in BFA seems to start with faction war and moves into old gods and Ashara. I hope so. I do hope so. It might be wishful thinking. Yes, I know there's got to be some old godsy theme in it. There's various things pointing to that, not least of which the Queen Ashara herself. But they have said that they want to make this faction v faction thing the theme running throughout the expansion. Now, I know it's easy to imagine, based on past experiences, that it could start as a big blow-up, and then the old gods come out, oh, common enemy, we basically have to end up working together, and we're all happy singing and dancing at the end of it, and then something else kicks off, and it goes into the next expansion where, oh, no, this expansion is the one where it's going to be faction v faction. But I'm not sure, especially as some of the content really lends itself, like, I mean, you've got the islands. We know the islands are going to be a really big thing in the next expansion. But then there's also got those other things. What are they called? War fronts. Where that's going to be... It's not going to be PvP. It sort of almost sounds like a battleground like Alterat Valley. Except the opposite faction are going to be NPCs. Those smart NPCs, not the players. And that is obviously going to also... Or it's intended to be a major content feature as well. So I do sort of believe them when they're going to be talking about faction v faction as being the main theme throughout the expansion, not just something to start off with. At the same time, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? The Queen Ashara is not just going to be a boss that either the Alliance or the Horde fight. It's going to be something that both fight, which means it doesn't really matter what you're doing in terms of storyline and quest. The storyline is that the Horde and the Alliance have got a common enemy again. It's as simple as that. So quite how they're going to do it that sort of changes that, I really don't know, other than some crude device like ICC gunship type thing. They have said, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, they have said that there is the possibility, only that, a possibility, that there might be faction-specific bosses, but, it's really good. It's going to be the same raid, and it's going to be the same main bosses, and it's going to be the same storyline that leads you to it, which means we're basically treading the same path. The Horde and the Alliance are going to be following basically the same path. There might be different levelling experiences this time, because after all, we're going to be in different zones. That hasn't happened for a little while. When was the last time that happened? Hold on. Can't even remember. I suppose Warlords of Draenor, the first zone, was different. But this is going to be the case that all the levelling zones are going to be different. That's never happened before, really, has it? Not since vanilla, you would argue. Yeah. So that in itself is just, adds credibility to their statement, I think. But, yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. But I do hope that the old gods are going to be a more major theme than I fear they might be. They might just be like one tier, one raid tier, and then that's it. It could easily be that. I hope it's not. I hope it's not. Next one says, why not a Vantus rune for reputation? So you use it at the beginning of the week, and all week long you have a 10% rep buff for that faction. That's actually a really good idea. Although, however, it is one that Blizzard have superseded, because there are going to be things for scribes coming out, like contracts, where basically they can make something, a scribe can make something which and they can sell to another player or use themselves, and it does a little quest, and then you get, it's there to get reputations, so you get like a buff for reputations doing that. I don't think it lasts a week. But there is a similar thing like that. So scribes are going to be able to make stuff to allow you to boost your reputation with particular factions, you know, and get rep with those factions a bit quicker. So, you know, and that's, I did a video on that. I mean, that's the sort of thing that is going to make scribes more useful, because that's why I was talking about scribes in this expansion not being that useful. Because although tomes, you know, if you want to change your talents, you've got to use tomes. But I think, you know, just because of the cost of them, it's my impression that most people have decided that it's not really worth changing the talents. Especially as talents themselves don't seem to have worked out that well. For me, I know I can only speak about Rets at the moment, but I can use a talent set that I never need to change. It's the same talent set. I can use it on a single target boss, an AoE boss, Mythic Plus dungeons, fortified or tyrannical, it really doesn't matter. I change around my legendaries more than I change around my talents. And on the very rare occasions when I do change my talents, and then sometimes it's just off a whim, I'm so unused to doing it, and I forget to change them back. So I end up with the wrong talents or something. But, so yeah, it's not been that useful. The Vantus runes, of course, are useful. You know, progress raiding guilds will use those. But generally, they're going to be made in-house. There's going to be someone in the guild that can make them. So again, selling them, unlikely to be productive. I'd query who would buy a Vantus rune, who would actually buy one. Because if you're in a guild, even if you've got to provide your own in that guild, you know, there's going to be someone in the guild who can make it for you, for the materials. So, yeah, weird one. Next one, it says, on the Mythic Plus success, I thought Mythic Plus was very good when it first launched. The fact that almost any key was desirable was great, but then they changed the 3 chests and AP got uninteresting, and people got all the legendaries, so the elite stopped doing lower Mythic Plus keys with the casual players and only focus on high keys. Yeah, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing depends on your point of view. From my point of view, it was a good thing they changed it. But yes, there was a point, about a year ago, in fact, where it was very much the case, like a Friday night or some other time at the weekend, you know, a group of 4 people from a guild, like a tank, a healer, a couple of DPS, would basically scour the looking for group, and you'd be looking for people who might be alts or just, casual players or social, something like that, who had a key, usually like a +7 was a nice one, because it was high enough for you to get a reasonable amount of AP from it, but not so high that you couldn't easily boost someone who might be dead weight for all you knew. And you would just do that, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And it was great for the people who had the key but weren't part of a guild or a group that could do them, because a group would blast you through it easily for free and you would get 3 chests. And then you might even get the same group offering to do your +10 for you or something like that as well. Or you'd find another group to do that. And then it was symbiotic, so the people who were boosting you through it, they got plenty of AP. But it was a bit of an arsehole to do it, because it was a chore. You were doing it just to farm the AP, as the people who were boosting, that is. And I could well do without it. It was a bit of a crimp on my weekend, thinking, oh, Friday evening, oh, God, I've got to do a load of Mythic Plus, or something like that. And I was not, doing as many as some, but it was a lot for me. It removed the enjoyment, because Mythic Plus is enjoyable, but the fact that you were compelled to do it. If you compel someone to do anything, it becomes less enjoyable. You compel someone to eat some cheesecake, or all of a sudden cheesecake loses its luster, doesn't it? Because, I don't want to be forced to eat it. I want to eat it on my terms. Cheesecake, my favourite dessert, by the way. So, yeah, pros and cons there. So I can understand how people that, were getting their key boosted would have been disappointed with that. It was nothing to do with the legendaries, by the way, although, of course, Mythic Plus did give you a regular crack at legendaries. That wasn't the main reason it stopped. It stopped purely and simply because the return for artifact power, it wasn't even directly to do with the loot, although, the loot and the legendaries were secondary. it was a source of getting AP. As soon as we didn't need to farm AP so much anymore, because we'd completed our artifacts before they brought out the Broken Shore, that's really what mostly knocked it on the head. And then, of course, as soon as they came up with... Because you say, you know, most things were desirable. What was most desirable was more souls. So when they introduced the idea that actually the quicker dungeons wouldn't give you as much AP, that sort of was another nail in the coffin there. But yeah, in terms of whether it was a good thing or a bad thing they did it, it massively depended on your point of view. But do bear in mind, there is, I mean, I always say in a situation like this, pugs should always be a last resort anyway. When it comes to group PvE, your first plan, your plan A, in fact, your plan A, B and C should always be get into a guild of like-minded people and get a group together. Or even outside of the guild, go on Wild Progress and advertise that you're looking for a Mythic Plus group. You know, I'm about this level, this is my sort of level. Find 4 other people of the correct roles that are also like that and find a regular time of week when you can just do them together. That's the best way to do it. Preferably in a guild, though, I would say, or a group of friends. But the best way to do it is absolutely that. Pug is your plan Z. Or should I say Z before people complain? No, it's Z. Okay, so on to the last one. We need a little bit more gnome education here. So, first of all, it says BFA theory. Gnomes set fire to it. This is talking about the World Tree, Donatus, basically. Gnomes set fire to it in a mad experiment. Then we have a joint war with Horde and Alliance to exterminate the gnomes in their newly reclaimed fortified gnome Ragon. Sounds lovely. Horde and Alliance working together to eradicate the gnomes, finally recognising them as the real insidious threat to Azeroth. However, there's a small flaw in your plan. Your scheme has a little crack in it. And that is that gnomes are not able to reclaim from Gnome Ragon. They have been trying for years. They were kicked out by Trogs. Okay? You know, they've been camped there for years. They had another crack at dealing with it, I gather, at the end of Wrath. I wasn't playing at the time because I decided to quit WoW. I came crawling back, of course, at some point. But so they tried to take it back and they've got nowhere. All they've managed to do in... How many years is it now since that happened? Oh, I can't even think. It's probably closing on a decade now. Is it about 8 or 9 years since that happened? All they've actually managed to achieve, other than the ecological wasteland that you now see around Gnome Ragon, is they've managed to pitch a tent or two. There's a couple of tents they've managed to erect in all that time. Great, okay. They've posted a couple of guards on the doorway into it, but not actually gone into it. And that was at a time when Trogs were just like level 27 monsters. The thing is now, if those gnomes now go in, they'll find them at level 60, won't they? Because, you know, it's scaling, I suppose. So it's now technically more difficult to reclaim Gnome Ragon, the thing that was already easy. I used to reclaim it on a regular basis when I was trying to farm stuff from it. So no. And then the final gnome one. Gnome Druids. Again, how can I explain this? Oh, I know. No. Could you imagine? Seriously, I've said this before. How do I have to keep saying it? Gnomes as druids. Are you mad? So, picture it, if you will. So, for example, the gnome bear form. Does that look ferocious and terrifying to you? No. The gnome feral form. The gnome resto. Travel form. Flight form. It's all a complete shit show. You cannot do that. Gnome druids would be the single most laughable thing you can imagine. I don't even know what caused them to take leave of their senses when they first of all introduced gnome priests and then gnome hunters. Nothing good comes of having gnome hunters. And definitely nothing good comes of gnome priests, because you just give them the tools not to heal people, but to kill people. That's what they do. They kill people. So, no, that's why we can't have gnome druids. It's fairly obvious why we can't have gnome paladins. I know that we're basically two of the last bastions of no gnomes allowed. Shaman are in there as well. Shaman are in there as well. That's pretty much it now, isn't it? There is nothing else that can't be a gnome. Am I wrong about that? I think that's it, isn't it? All the other classes have been contaminated with gnomes. So shaman, druids and paladins are the final bastion, and we will not fall, we will stand. And with that, that's this week's mailbox. Thanks very much. Keep your comments coming in. Do this every week. If you've enjoyed it, give it a like, subscribe, share with other people who might also be interested. Comments down below as well. No gnomes. Until next time, I'll see you later.